12:21 a.m. He hunted me and I didn't get it until too late. It started with that little whistle out by the fence. One short note. I heard it and smiled because I was the only idiot still up. I was a night owl. I made jokes about it. "All right, birds," I said. I stayed in my chair and scrolled. 12:28 a.m. Another whistle. Same pitch. I cracked the window 2 inches. Cold air came in. I listened. It stopped. I told myself it was nothing. I wrote myself a note to get thicker curtains because the streetlight bugged me. I was stupid about the wrong things. 12:34 a.m. Trash lid clapped out back. I laughed. Raccoons. I said that out loud like a host. Raccoons, folks. I didn't get up. 12:41 a.m. My phone buzzed with a spam call. I muted it. The dog across the alley barked twice and shut up. That part felt wrong, but I shrugged it off. I kept scrolling. I watched a video about sharpening a blade. I thought about ordering a better one. 12:52 a.m. Tap on the glass. Not loud. Fingernail sound. I stood up and felt dumb because I hadn't put on pants. I grabbed a hoodie. I went to the back door and looked. The porch light was off. I flipped the switch. It didn't come on. 12:54 a.m. I got the step stool and reached up to the bulb. Cool to the touch. He had unscrewed it. I didn't know that yet. My brain said bulb went bad. I said, "Of course it did," and laughed. 1:02 a.m. Something rubbed the screen on the kitchen window. Long and slow. I had the sink light on. Everything else was dark. I stood there with my hands on the counter and listened. It stopped when I moved. I decided it was a branch. I didn't have a tree. 1:09 a.m. I thought about going to bed. I typed a message to a friend saying I was hearing weird stuff. I deleted it. I told myself I didn't need to be that guy. 1:14 a.m. The front gate squeaked. Metal on metal. It did that when I got DoorDash. I looked at the app. Nothing. I watched the little map anyway like an idiot. 1:18 a.m. I took a breath, went to the hall closet, and pulled out a baseball bat, a pocket knife, and a flashlight. I set them on the table like I did it every night. I said something like, "Tool time," to no one. The joke fell flat in my own mouth. 1:23 a.m. I took the light and tried the back steps. I opened the door a crack and swept the beam across the yard. Nothing moved. The trash can sat there. The lid wasn't sitting right. I went down and fixed it and felt brave. I even walked to the fence and checked the latch like a landlord. It held. 1:27 a.m. False Peak 1. On the way back up the steps, something knocked the broom I kept by the door. It fell and made me jump, and I swung the bat so hard I hit the wall. It sounded like a gunshot in the small space. I laughed at myself. I laughed too long. I went inside and set the bat against the counter. "Raccoons," I said again. I made coffee because I was awake now. 1:35 a.m. Little squeak from the garden. Not a whistle this time. That dry, tight sound like a toy. I had watched a video once about rabbit distress calls. It sounded like that. I told myself someone in the next yard was watching the same video with the sound up. I turned my speakers up and played music for 1 minute. It made me feel worse, not better. I turned it off and listened again. 1:41 a.m. Footsteps on gravel. Slow. I had no gravel. The alley did. I went to the bathroom, stood on the tub, and peeked through the tiny little window at the alley. Empty. A car went by way down. My breath fogged the glass. 1:44 a.m. The front door chain clicked once. It didn't open. It just moved. I stood in the hall and stared at the door. The peephole showed the hall light and my own reflection. I pressed my eye to it until my head hurt. I saw nothing. 1:49 a.m. I said, "I'm calling the cops." I didn't. I said it anyway, loud. The house felt like it held the sound and handed it back to me. 1:52 a.m. I actually called. It rang. I told the lady I heard someone messing with my doors. She asked my address twice. She asked if I saw anyone. I said no. She said someone would drive by. That sounded fake and far away. I said thanks. I hung up. 2:03 a.m. The squeak came again, right at the kitchen window. Not the outside. Right against the screen. I snapped the light off and stood still. My heart banged hard enough I could hear it in my ears. A smear of dirty handprint sat low on the glass. I hadn't seen that before. My stomach went cold. 2:07 a.m. False peak 2. I walked to the front door fast, took the bat, opened the door, and yelled into the hall, loud and stupid. I called the police, I said. A door on the second floor opened and a neighbor stuck his head out and said, "Dude?" I laughed and waved the bat around and said it was fine. I felt safe because someone else was awake. I shut my door and locked it and put the chain on. I said, "See? Solved." My voice shook on the last word. 2:13 a.m. Something slid under the door. It scratched the wood. I stared at the gap. A loop of clear line snagged on the chain. Fishing line. He had been lifting it. My brain did a thing like throwing up, but in thought. I pulled the line through and dropped it. I didn't touch the chain. 2:18 a.m. I turned off every light. I sat on the floor with my back to the fridge and listened. My phone lit my jeans. I put it face down. I heard my breath in the refrigerator humming and nothing else. That nothing felt worse. 2:26 a.m. I texted my neighbor, "You up?" He didn't answer. I typed, "Someone is outside." I didn't hit send. I wished I had a dog. I wished I had another person in the house. 2:31 a.m. I decided to leave. I couldn't sit in that kitchen waiting. I grabbed my keys. I took the bat and the light. I left the knife on the table by mistake. That hit me later. I slipped my shoes on by the back door. No socks. 2:34 a.m. False peak 3. I opened the back door and eased out. The lights still didn't work. I moved the light beam slow across the yard and kept it low. A shape moved by the fence. My thumb shook on the switch and the light washed across a torn trash bag that flapped. I almost laughed with relief. I made it to the car. I got in, locked the doors, and stuck the key in. Nothing. Not even a click. Dead. My hands went cold. I lifted the light and looked at the hood. The battery cable sat wrong. Not off. Just loosened. He had lifted the hood while I sat 20 feet away. I started breathing too fast. I opened the door and ran back to the house. My socks slapped the cold step. I dropped the keys. The bat banged the railing. I slammed the door and locked it and slid the chain. It caught. 2:38 a.m. I called 911 again. The call dropped twice. On the third try, I told the same lady. She sounded bored and scared at the same time. She said they were sending someone to check the area. I asked for an ETA. She said, "I don't have one." I hung up and sat on the floor again and tried to slow my breathing. 2:41 a.m., I noticed the line again. The fishing line lay in a coil by the door. The end stuck to the chain with tape. He had threaded it through the gap and around the chain loop. I pulled the tape off and took the chain off myself. I opened the door 1 inch and looked. The hall was empty. The light buzzed. I closed it and put the chain back and my hands shook. 2:46 a.m. feet on the back steps. Not even pretending this time. 1, 2, 3. My kitchen window went dark like someone stood close to it. I picked up the bat and went down the hall to the bedroom and shut the door. I put the dresser in front of it. I hated myself for not having the knife. I held the bat so tight my fingers hurt. 2:51 a.m. He tried the bedroom window. Not a hard try. Just a little lift. A little test. The latch held. I held my breath. Sweat went down my side. I felt stupid writing that, but it happened. He scratched the glass with something sharp, like he was signing his name into it just to make the noise. 2:58 a.m. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You up?" I stared at it and felt something slide out of my head like hot water. It had to be one of those spoof things. I blocked it. I killed the sound on my phone and hated that I did, because then I couldn't hear if dispatch called back. I turned the sound on again. I was falling apart. 3:03 a.m. front door. The chain didn't make a sound. The lock clicked once. Then again. He had the line back through. He had the keyholes mapped. I cursed into the blanket and tasted dust. I texted the neighbor finally. "Please wake up." No answer. 3:08 a.m. I thought about how it would go if I waited. If I stayed quiet, would he get bored? He wasn't a bored guy. He was a hunter. He waited for a living. I understood that then. 3:12 a.m. My bedroom doorknob turned. Not fast. Just a test. I slid the dresser harder into it and made a scraping noise. The knob stopped and then turned the other way. I said, "I have a bat." My voice sounded like someone else. He made that squeak again, soft and short, right against the wood. 3:15 a.m. Silence. I brought the light up and aimed it at the bottom of the door. A shadow moved, then moved back. No feet. He was off to the side. He knew the angle. He knew where the light would go. 3:19 a.m. The house creaked from the kitchen like weight sat on the counter. I knew my counters. They didn't creak for nothing. He was inside and I had missed it. The back door had opened when I ran. I must have left it on the first latch. My stomach did that flip again and I almost threw up into my hoodie. 3:23 a.m. Something bumped the dresser from the other side. Not hard. Just enough to say hi. I lifted the bat and told myself I'd swing for his knee. I told myself that would stop him. I believed it for 5 seconds. It was a dumb thought. He was bigger. I knew that without seeing him. 3:27 a.m. outside. A car door slammed. Not here. Somewhere down the street. The sound came clean through the cold. That and the wind chimed 3 houses over. I didn't own a chime. He would listen to that too, like I was now. I hated that we were listening to the same street. 3:30 a.m. Climax. I moved the dresser because waiting felt like dying. I opened the bedroom door slow and stepped into the hall with the bat. I told myself to make noise so he wouldn't surprise me. My foot hit a slick patch. Mud. On my floor. I almost went down. I got to the front door. I undid the chain and deadbolt. I pulled. He stood there in the doorway and filled it. Broad and quiet. Boots left a wet edge on my mat. Jacket up to the chin. No mask. His eyes didn't look at my face. They did a quick pass over the bat in my hand and the light, then the corners of the room. He had a bow in one hand, not drawn, just held sideways. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. His shoulders were set wide so I couldn't go past without touching him. He stood like the frame was made for him. I said, "Get out of my house." It came out wrong. Thin, like a kid. He didn't move. He made that little squeak once. I knew then it had been in his pocket the whole time. A mouth call. He tapped the jam with one knuckle. A small, dull sound. He waited. He waited. I raised the bat. He took one step into the frame, and the bow touched the bat and pinned it to the wall without force. Just placed it. Like he did it 1,000 times. He looked at me then. Not in the eyes. At my throat. It felt like I got smaller. Headlights swept across the hall from the street for 2 seconds. Someone turned onto the block. He looked over my shoulder toward the bedroom. He stepped back like he had all night to do it. He went out and down the steps without a sound. He left the door wide. I stood there with the bat up and didn't follow. I couldn't move my feet. 3:33 a.m. I pushed the door shut. The chain hung in 2 pieces on the floor. I picked them up and my hands didn't work. The bow scuff sat on the wall as a clean mark. I listened to the street and heard nothing. No sirens. No voices. Only that distant chime. 3:39 a.m. I called again and told them he had been inside. I said the word inside 3 times. The lady said someone was on the way. I sat in the kitchen with the bat and the light and waited. I didn't go touch the windows. I didn't look for prints. I didn't want to see him looking back from any edge. I knew he was out there, just out of sight, watching me through the dark glass. 4:12 a.m. a car rolled by slow. Didn't stop. I called again. They said they didn't see anyone. I nodded and said okay and hung up. My voice sounded normal again. That made me feel weird. I went to the sink and washed my hands and they shook so much I dropped the soap. 4:30 a.m. I moved the dresser back. I put the bat by the door. I found the knife where I had left it by the table. I put it in my pocket like it mattered now. It didn't. 4:57 a.m. The sky lightened. I watched the fence until I saw detail again. I went outside in daylight and found the bulb on the porch unscrewed 2 turns. He had stood under my overhang and done that while I listened. The battery cables sat loose. Footprints came from the alley and went to the back steps and then to the front sidewalk. They didn't go away after that. He had left with the grass. It didn't matter. He didn't need prints. He had me. 5:13 a.m. I wrote this because I slept at noon and woke up at 5 and walked around my house with a stupid little cup of coffee like nothing had happened. He took that from me in one night. I kept thinking, if the headlights hadn't hit the hall, would he have moved? Or would I have swung and missed and fallen and that would have been that? I don't know. I stopped pretending I knew anything about him. 6:41 a.m. The best I had was a broken chain and a clean mark on my wall and a dead car. I could call a guy to fix the car and a guy to put in more locks. I could move. He knew what I looked like when I got scared. That didn't move. 7:02 a.m. I wrote this and tried not to make it sound like a story. It wasn't. It was a list of small things that stacked until I broke. He didn't run. He waited. He took his steps and he left when he wanted. He would do it again. Not because of me, because he did it. 7:10 a.m. Last night, after they drove by and left, I sat by the door and heard one more sound. Not loud. Just that dry little squeak from the hedges like he tested it again, like he made sure I heard it. I did. I still did when I wrote this. I knew he would be back. I heard that sound in my head and saw him standing in the doorway, wide and quiet, blocking the world. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps the channel. And if you're not too scared yet, check out one of the other stories waiting for you. See you in the next one.